Good afternoon and welcome to a session on managing technology teams and operating models with our expert Vikas Mujumdar. Vikas is a career technologist, having spent the last 3 decades in various roles, with the last few years as the CIO at Aditya Birla Payments Bank and Equifax. Vikas also spent some time working as head of digital transformation and innovation for the Aditya Birla Group, advising their old economy businesses on their transformation strategy and execution. Vikas has recently set up an edtech and consulting venture, STEMventure.com. The focus is on delivering learning programs on computing technology of the future, including cloud computing, blockchain, 3D printing, AR, VR, and drones. The program caters to both students and professionals with a focus on hands on learning for students and industry application orientation for professionals. Welcome, Vikas, and let's start the session.
This is actually the third in a series of sessions that I have been conducted over the last couple of months. The first one was introducing the entire digital transformation technology landscape, right? What all are the emerging technologies that are becoming relevant to businesses from a future perspective? What all do they need to do to kind of stay competitive, stay ahead, sometimes even stay relevant? So in the first session, we talked about the technologies themselves, a very quick overview as to what is the landscape. In the second session, we talked about how to measure the impact of investments in these technologies, right? I mean, it's a lot of money that businesses are spending, but I think it's important to understand what you are spending on, what is the value you are getting from it. There is no point in spending on technology just for the sake of it. It has to result in a business value. So in the second session, we covered a whole bunch of metrics that allow you to measure the actual impact that implementing these technologies has on your business, right? Now, today in the third session, what we're going to actually cover is how do you manage your technology teams and your operating models? See, the thing is that, it's all very well to talk about these brand new technologies. It's all very well to talk about things like digital transformation, right? Now, the benefits are definitely going to be there. If the execution is done correctly, the benefits are a no-brainer. But are we doing the execution correctly? See, one of the biggest problems is that, we've been in IT, all our industries have been implementing various IT solutions for decades now. But all of them are also entrenched in a lot of way of doing things in a particular manner. Now, as technology evolves, even the teams and the way they work and the way they actually deliver solutions has to evolve, right? I don't believe that doing things in the same way is going to actually help anyone to be successful. I am a technologist with about 3 decades of experience, having done various things across exciting businesses. And today I run a technology consulting, training, and advisory business where I actually advise small businesses on implementing emerging technology. Right. So that's a very brief introduction to myself, hoping that makes me relevant to give insights into these areas. Right. Now let's jump into the topic at hand that you guys have all joined to listen to. Right. Now this is the point I was making just before we did a brief break for introduction. Right. There's a rapid evolution of technology. That's a no-brainer, right? And there's nothing much that I need to say there. But the questions that you need to ask yourself as an enterprise is, are you leveraging that well, right? Technology may be evolving, but is it making a difference to your business? Are your teams, both technical and non-technical, up to speed on the evolution and adoption trends, right? Now, it's important, this is actually pretty important to understand uh, both the evolution and adoption trends. If you were part of my first session, you would know that technology goes through, what Gartner very lovely puts it as the Gartner hype cycle. So some technologies are rather in the nascent stage; they're not yet mature for enterprise adoption. Some technologies have a lot of hype around them, so you may use them but not really realize the expected value. So is everyone really aware of what's going on, right? Now, and also when you decide what technology implementations to do you work with data-driven insights or do you just go with media hype? Things in the media are not necessarily do not necessarily reflect reality, right? They're just meant to kind of give you very very quick high level probably slightly exaggerated overviews. So it's interesting how at one point digital transformation was a big thing. Now chat GPT is a big thing. Interestingly, if we've all been following, metaverse was supposed to be a very big thing, and now suddenly it's declining into nothing. So the point I'm trying to make is, I don't have a comment on how media handles all this, but the point I'm trying to make is, as a business, you can't rely on that sort of information to take your technology decisions, right? And the second aspect I talk a lot about is FOMO. Just because and all other businesses are doing it doesn't necessarily mean you must do the same thing, right? You have to figure out what's right for yourself. So the point I'm trying to make is that although technology is evolving rapidly, are you keeping up to speed on that, right? Uh, Now, that was the first question, but this is actually the crux of what we're going to talk today. And I say new wine in an old bottle. What I mean is that, look, there is all this new technology happening, okay? But if you try and adopt this new technology, I will randomly take artificial intelligence as an example. And if you just say that, let me take artificial intelligence and all the algorithms that exist out there and plug them into my processes, life is not that simple. Very often, when you want to actually use this emerging and new technology, you also have to take a look at your way of doing business, right? Are you doing business in the optimal way? Are your business models and processes running well? And if they are not, sometimes you need to re-engineer or restructure your business and operating processes so that they can actually leverage the new technology, right? So, if I was to give you an example, let's take AI and let's take chatbots that are used in customer service, right? See, it's very easy to deploy a chatbot out there. But for example, do you have a mechanism where if the chatbot is not able to give satisfactory answers, then can you route that, and do you have a manual call center intervention that can actually solve the problem of the customer? So have you managed to integrate the the chatbot into your manual systems as well, right? It's a very simplistic example I'm giving, but that's what I mean. So don't just put a chatbot out there and expect that it will work. If it's not integrated with your actual human interfaces, then that technology is not going to give you the value you expect, right? Then are you using the right tools that can help you leverage the power of new technology? And that question I won't try to answer in brief. A lot of this presentation, a lot of this discussion actually focuses on that, right? The fourth point also we will talk about briefly. Are you upskilling people and realigning the org structure, right? Many roles that existed in the past in IT organizations, do exist. They do continue to exist. But the definition of what is expected of that role may be changing. Not maybe changing, it's quite often changing. So if your people are not upskilled, if they don't know what is the new expectation from them, then how are they going to actually implement and leverage the value of new technology, right? And the last one is, are you evaluating and restructuring your financial models? There, I'll give you the example of the cloud, right? As we all know that cloud offers you a pretty convenient pay-per-use model, so you don't have to upfront invest in servers. Now, if you want to leverage the cloud as an upcoming and emerging technology, is your finance team also aware that they may have to change their modeling to move, let's say, from capex to opex or whatever, right? So if you get the point I'm trying to make, new technology cannot be brought in without any changes to many aspects of your existing business, right? Including what I just listed, your business models, operating processes, people, org structures, and financial models, okay? So let's go a little deeper and see what all is changing and what all you need to do to actually leverage. Okay? That was setting the context. Let's talk a little bit about people. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I'm actually going to spend a lot more time on processes and tools, but let's talk a bit about people. So typically, and nothing much changes here, IT organization, it could either be an in-house team or you could be outsourcing it to a services provider, right? Now, if you have an in-house team, you have more control. The people are generally more committed because the business's success is also their success and so on. But when you talk about emerging technology, if you are not able to recruit those skills, or if you're not able to upskill your own teams, then you are actually going to be forced to outsource, right? And outsourcing has its advantages, but somehow, it's very likely that long-term commitment won't be as much as you would get from an employee. So that's one impact when you start talking new technology. If you want to build AI algorithms, you want to build, I don't know, image recognition tools in a retail store and so on. Do you really have in-house capability to do that? Otherwise, whatever you've been doing in-house for the last decade, you suddenly realize that I need to now find a partner. Okay, so that can be a big impact on simply how you work. Then the size. Now, the size, actually, this is nothing new necessarily, but the size matters. If you're a small business, you can generally, you're not going to have a very large IT team, in which case you will need some generalists, and it's difficult to have people who are very highly specialized, right? So how do you go about that? How do you get a small team to learn all aspects of new technologies, right? And there are so many of them out there. So that's the second problem. And then the third problem is, obviously you need to understand your organizational goals and approach, right? If you are a very custom software based business, then you will need larger teams and they will need to be upskilled. If you are largely a solution that, like, let's say a very simple example would be a bank where your core solution is a third party core banking system, right? Now, if you want to add some artificial intelligence to that in the form of new and revised AI/ML algorithms, then the company that's selling you the product will do it for you. You don't have to worry so much. So it depends on what kind of a business model you have, right? Now let's talk a little bit about the people, continuing with the people, but let's talk a little bit about the leadership roles and skills for the future, right? What is in gray is, those roles have been around for ages. What's in green, I believe, are roles that are evolving because of new technology, right? Having said that, even the older roles, right, they need to be, the people in those roles need to be aware of what's happening with new technology to be able to do their work well. So, I won't get into a debate or a distinction between CIO and CTO, but broadly, I would argue that both those top leadership CXO positions have to be very, very well aware of technology adoption trends. In fact, they are the leaders, they are the decision makers. So they are the last ones that need to be influenced by media. And they are the first ones who need to really understand how technology is evolving and what is most suitable for your organization. All right. So that actually makes the role of a CTO, CIO quite important. It also makes it necessary for the CIO and CTO to be upskilling themselves. All right. Upskilling doesn't mean that only it is not only for junior level. Right. Upskilling is for everyone. If a CIO and CTO doesn't understand what ChatGPT is exactly and is it really relevant to my business, then they could either be missing out on something useful or they could be spending a lot of money on something that's not so useful, right? So those two roles also need to understand what's going on. So the two new roles that I see is a chief data officer. I'm not saying it did not exist in some form or manner, but I think the way data is growing now, and especially with emerging technology like IoT, the volume of data and obviously big data as we refer to it is becoming very important. And even if you look at data science or analytics that we derive from data, that's becoming very important because it's giving us a lot more insights than before to run a business. So the role of a chief data officer can actually take on a great importance, and it can actually sit alongside the role of a CTO, right? So that's, I think, a new role that's coming up because of the way technology and data is evolving, right? So, and obviously the skills is what I mentioned there. Unlike application development, this leader has to have a deep knowledge about data science and technology. Okay. And the other role, now this is very interesting, and I may have a slightly contrarian or this may be a debatable opinion, but there is a role that is now evolved, which is referred to as the chief digital officer. Over the last couple of years, digital transformation has become a very big thing. And the chief digital officer is supposed to be in charge of digital transformation in some form or manner. But I tend to say that, you can't confuse these roles. You don't want people stepping on each other's toes. So if you must engage someone in the role of a chief digital officer, I think there is scope, right? There is scope that that person can focus on some aspects, and I will get into those aspects through the course of this discussion. And maybe let the CIO do the management piece, let the CTO do the technical piece, and the chief digital officer can make sure that all of these new technologies are leveraged well by introducing some of the new process changes that I will be talking about shortly, right? So, this is what I'm giving is just illustrative examples. This is I'm not prescribing anything to anyone, but I think this is how the roles can evolve, and we could actually assign responsibilities to all of these leaders so that each one is able to contribute in the best way possible. All right. And the CISO is the same. I mean, the job is only becoming more difficult because of you have web apps, you have mobile apps, you're soon going to have distributed architectures. So the role of the CISO and the function remains the same, except I believe it's going to become a lot more difficult, right? And in case of teams, I'm not going to talk at all here because it's the same, right? I have to say that whatever be the technology, the fundamentals of application, software, solution development has not changed. The way they go about it, it has changed or will change, and that's what I'll talk about, all right? So you still have your project programs, scrum masters, you still have your architects and designers, developers, QA, infra, infosec. They're all there, nothing changes, all right? So let's move on, right, to processes. Now, this is going to be quite, I have a lot of information in this. I'll try and keep it a little simple. But I think when you're implementing new technology or when you're implementing projects using new technology, a lot of the older legacy approaches and processes need to be changed. All right. And let me walk you through and you will see what I'm talking about. Now, there are 2-3 things before I get into this. I want to put on the table so that everyone actually, in a sense, breathes easy. One is none of these are, how do I say, they're not rules, okay? They're not rules or laws. They're only guidelines. So you must adapt the best of what you see that is suitable for your business, your organization, and the size of project. Sometimes what I feel is that these processes, if you look at it from a purely theoretical level, they can be so cumbersome that they may actually just add more weight to your work and not give you enough value. All right. So that's the first caveat. Don't take all of what I say when I describe these processes too literally. But as they say, understand the spirit of these processes and then try to adapt them the best you can, right? Because there's a lot of value that they bring to the table. So if you were to adapt some variation of these processes, it'll make a big difference, right? So let's take a look at what I'm going to talk about, right? Okay, the first one is Agile. Now, look, Agile is not new. Agile has been around for decades now. But I still want to talk about it because I strongly believe that everyone wants to believe they're agile. Everybody thinks they're already agile. But I think there's a lot of work still required to reach agile in its true sense. Because agile is not only about technology development. Agile is a complete organizational change where every function that is participating in a new solution development must be agile. So starting from people who tell you what they want as product features, to the teams who actually, let's say in simplest terms, do the UAT, do the testing, and the teams through the development and deployment, they all need to be very quick in their responses, right? It's not that, fine, you're done with this, now I don't have time to do my piece, so I'll let everything wait. That's not agile. So you can't say that the developer finished their sprint, but it's waiting on someone else. If you say something like that, the whole concept of agile breaks down. So you have to be collaborative across functions, and in many cases, work needs to be done simultaneously, right? So while one team is writing code, the other team is actually writing the test cases and almost in parallel executing and so on. Okay. So open communication, collaboration, adaptation to what each other is doing, all these cultural concepts are very important. So, and it's an old concept. So many organizations may already be there, But if not, before you embark on adopting too many new technologies and trying to do too much of digital transformation, try and see if how agile you really are and what you might need to do to change the mindsets of people to actually make them agile. All right. So, the last 4 points are pretty important. So I think individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So while processes and tools are important, I think technology and application and solution development eventually comes down to people, right? It's all about how good people are. For a moment, I'll keep aside this whole theory about how Chat GPT is going to take over. I'm not yet a huge subscriber to that theory. So for now, for me, it is still individuals. So the individuals do it right, and the individuals interact with each other well. There's good communication, and you could use tools to do that. Then I think that's what Agile is all about. All right. So working software over comprehensive documentation. Now, yeah, I mean, documentation is important, but make sure everything that every piece of code that you write works, right? There is a general tendency to say, I will write a somewhat working piece of code and then let the QA team find the bugs and then I will fix them. So that's really not the best way to be. If you really want to be agile, you have to take pride and make sure that every single piece of work you release is defect free. Okay. The third point is customer collaboration. Now, these may be internal customers or external customers. One of the biggest debates I'm sure all of you keep having with product teams or business teams or even customers is this was not in the functional specification. I am fairly sure that's the number one debate that people have, right? With Agile, that should go away. Yeah, let's not put the burden on the other side, because to be fair, it's very hard to define all your requirements upfront. Sometimes your own requirements change. Sometimes when you see work in progress, when you see a product delivered to you, you get new ideas, right? So I think Agile helps that, and then together you can build a phenomenal product. If you try to have an expectation that I know everything I want right up front, and for 1 year I cannot change that view, that's the model we've been working with for decades now, and generally that's not resulted in high quality and customer satisfaction, right? So that's very important. And then response to change over plan following. This is actually very similar to what I've just been saying. If you get a change request, your teams should be adaptable enough to actually absorb that change. Now I can grant that the change cannot be a 180-degree turn, right? But anything, I would just to take that analogy, anything less than a 90-degree turn, I think should be easily absorbable. So I think that's what Agile is all about, and you have to see whether you have that in your organization culture. Okay. Now, so that was old. I think we still have a lot of work to do, but everyone at least knows about Agile. Now, there are actually a few functions and processes that are emerging today along with the adoption of new technology, right? And literally, I would argue that some of these did not really exist in the past, although we've been doing IT for decades. Okay. The first one is DevOps. Now, it did exist. I'm not arguing that it just came into play, but it was never really so actively incorporated in many development processes, right? So what is DevOps? DevOps is essentially saying that the development team and the operations team being the folks who build, deploy the code that the development team writes, and who maintains the infrastructure that hosts the code, right? So it's a no-brainer, right? I'm stating the obvious when I say that an application requires to be written as code. It needs to be deployed properly on a good working infrastructure. And when all of that happens properly, the customer gets what they want. So until now, we've always had the development teams different, infrastructure team different, I don't know who did deployment. Sometimes infra does deployment, sometimes the development team does deployment. So we need to get away from all that and understand that DevOps is really one team. So it should not be throwing over the wall, as they say, from application to infra. And then even when there is a problem, it should not be that, it's your problem versus mine. When you talk DevOps, it's a common problem, all right? And the processes and tools that I'll talk about in the next few slides that will show you how this is facilitating this sort of collaboration. Okay. So I think DevOps is, although I won't say it's a new thing, but it is really, really the ask of the day if you want to get serious about new technology, right? So what are we talking about DevOps principles, right? And so the first is automation of the software development lifecycle. Now, this is extremely important, although it's sort of a sub point. I think automation should have been a main point. Um, One of the key factors to achieving successful DevOps setup is to introduce a lot of automation, right? To get the level of sophistication that DevOps requires, it's not possible if you still allow every task to be manual. Now, automating each task is actually quite a challenge. So, all of us need to evaluate for our own organizations how much have we automated, what can we automate easily, and what is going to require a lot of effort to automate. All right. So that's the biggest one. The rest of them, to be honest, are more soft skills. I'm not so worried. It's easier to achieve, but automation is one of the most difficult things to achieve, and that's what everyone needs to focus on. All right. This is actually everything to do with automation. So I'm sure all of you have heard of CI/CD. It's a absolutely established way of working. Although I'm not sure, and it's really for everyone to speak for themselves, but I'm not sure how frequently it's followed. So essentially, CI/CD is the integral part of what we say you should when you do DevOps and automation, right? Uh, if I have to just explain this as a quick story, when you're writing a piece of code, when you're writing an application or deploying a solution, the process starts from the requirements capture, and then the design architects and designers designing, the developers writing the code, then the code is tested, and then it is deployed, right? So all of this in most scenarios until today happens in discrete chunks. Even if I say agile sprints, right, it's quite discrete. I mean, my sprint could be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks. If I do waterfall, then my time to delivery can be months. So I spent 4 months developing, then the deployment guys will take the QA guys will take 1 month to test, and so on and so forth. Then by the time the original request from the business till the time the business sees a piece of the product working, it could be many months have gone by, right? So that's the traditional approach we've been working. Now, CI/CD, very simply put, is trying to say that, uh, you know, application developers should push code into version control, right? Which is obviously all of us know and use version control. It's actually suggests you should push code multiple times a day. Now, to my previous comment that sometimes the cycle to finish development is months, right? Imagine a mind shift where you are developing and pushing code into for testing multiple times a day, right? And imagine further that the code that you push into your version control system is automatically tested, because remember, we have automation, is automatically tested. Now remember, we have automated deployment scripts. So the moment the tests are successful, it is automatically deployed. And the moment it is deployed, it is theoretically available for the end user, right? Now, if you just try to visualize this, and this is what the end goal of a brilliant CI/CD process would be, is that the moment the developer writes a piece of code, you can, at a click of a button, submit that into version control. And from there, the scripts will take over, the automation scripts, and it will be tested, and perfectly working code will be deployed into the system, into the production system, right? So if you just visualize, just imagine how mind-boggling that can be. Now, try and go back to your teams, go back to your organizations and see that, are we there yet, right? Are my teams disciplined enough? Do we have the automation scripts? Do we have the tools for CI/CD? So you need tools. This is not going to happen on its own. So it's right from your version control to your build tools and so on. You need all of that in place, and only then all of them are going to work together, and this is going to happen, correct? But think of the concept. So we talked about being agile, And then we talked about automation. Now combine agility and automation. And now use CI/CD as an approach, right? So can you imagine if you were to get all of these three things together? Can you imagine how fast you could deploy solutions? How much you would reduce your downtime, how much you would reduce your rate of failure, all of these classic metrics that plague application development. Can you imagine what the impact would be, right? And the impact would not be minor. You would not see a single digit percentage reduction in downtime. You will see my downtime will reduce by 200%, not by 10%. So CI/CD is an extremely powerful process, all related, agile, automation, CI/CD, if you all see, they all really go hand in hand as concepts. And really the end goal is to make application development and deployment, first of all, defect free, right? In a very short period of time, and continuous. So in repeated quick intervals, right? So now you can say goodbye to these long 6-month development cycles before the product team or the business team or your end user sees an enhancement. No, your product team, business teams might see an enhancement literally every day if you want. Then spend some time and focus on getting your concept of DevOps right, making sure your DevOps teams exist and know how to work together, making sure you have automated as much as you can. I mean, automating everything right away is going to be difficult. So automate as much as you can, and then see to what extent you can achieve a CI/CD, right? Now, let me be clear and let me be practical. Suppose you don't have this at all. You're not going to be able to bring your development cycles from 6 months down to a day, like I just gave as a very optimal and exaggerated outcome. You may bring it down from 6 months to maybe just 4 months in the beginning, right? But then you've got to work progressively. Over the next year, you may bring it down from 4 months to 2 months. It may take you a year and a half, but then you will bring it down to every week, right? And maybe 2 years later, you'll be down to every day. And sometimes maybe that is not even required. So everything I've been saying so far, like I gave you that caveat right in the beginning, these are brilliant processes. These are brilliant approaches. The whole concept of requiring teams to work together in great collaboration, I think all of that is needed. Frankly, I think we could have used this even in the past, but maybe it just wasn't the need wasn't felt so much. But today, when you're adopting new technology, this is absolutely necessary. All right. So I hope the whole, the picture is all coming together, because I really want to keep on saying that these are not individual topics that one needs to learn. This is an entire range as a concept that you need to imbibe. Okay, and then pick and choose what you need to actually implement. Okay. So enough of that. I'm just going to move on now to something which is now called site reliability engineering. Now, I just want to pause and just say that, look, SRE is, the best of my knowledge, was a term that was originated at Google. And also it was originated more for cloud solutions. All right. But so it's not very much unlike DevOps. It's kind of a very similar thought process. But I think the point I liked is the last one. So in general, an SRE team is responsible for availability, latency, performance, efficiency, change management, everything that all of us need for our applications to run well and our customers to have a great experience, right? So Google has referred to this term as site reliability engineering. It's a pretty nice name. The people are known as site reliability engineers or SREs. And I think Google intended it to be more for cloud solutions. But somewhere I feel that conceptually, this is something that can apply to any kind of solution. All right. Now, I haven't done it yet. So if anybody asks me a question as to how do you differentiate, or what is the difference between SRE and DevOps, so I wouldn't be able to answer that. I think it's too nuanced. So we need to take both these concepts and see what is the best I can pick from both. And each organization can come up with their own new term and new approach, picking from the best principles, But in general, I thought this SRE was a good concept. Um, and I think it intends to do very similar things to what I've been saying so far. The only difference being originated by Google and meant for the cloud, right? So I think it's a nice concept to look up and see what we can learn from that. Right? Now, the last new sort of concept that is emerging is, and I'll talk about, is called FinOps, right? And I don't know how many people are familiar and how many people actually implement that. Now, FinOps, I think, is actually new. I don't think this concept of FinOps existed earlier, because largely the impact is more seen on the cloud. So businesses that have already migrated to the cloud, and if you heard my previous sessions, I did share that how while cloud is generally assumed to be inexpensive, sometimes cloud costs can go out of hand, right? And FinOps is the process that businesses can put in place to actually contain their cloud costs, all right, to prevent cloud costs running beyond control. So what is FinOps in fairly simple terms? So essentially, it's a way where you bring together mainly technology and finance teams. All right. Although I also say business here, but really it's technology and finance. The reason being, when you are spending money on technology, the technology team doesn't really focus too much on what the costs are, because their mandate, their interest, and their objective in general is to actually deliver the best possible solution, right? Now, the finance team's mandate is to keep an eye on the P&L, to keep an eye on the expenses, to keep an eye on the cost. So if both of these teams work independently, as actually they have been so far, then there is always a friction at a late stage. The technology teams will make a great plan for building this fancy product that the business asked for, and they don't care about how much it costs. And then at some point, the finance team comes and questions, did we really have to spend so much money, and what value are we getting from it, right? So this problem always existed. Now, when cloud deployment started, someone came up with this nice concept where let the two teams work together so that simultaneously they manage both the spend and the value that you derive from investing in technology. So I think this is a very new and a very good function that has evolved. So really every organization should try and put into practice, more so if you're on the cloud. Okay. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but building blocks of FinOps, accountability and enablement. So basically it means put together cross-functional teams. Don't make IT expenditure only for IT to worry about, right? Even the other teams need to worry about how much IT needs to spend, because there's value that is realized by everyone, right? Planning and forecasting, measurement and realization. So even the finance team should be interested in knowing, in measuring, and then knowing what is the value we realized. Okay, so all of these are the building blocks. I won't spend too much time on this, but FinOps as a function, I think we all need to start looking into. And like I said, more so if you are talking cloud migration. Okay, so this is a very interesting slide. I'm just going to, so I finished with the processes. I'm just going to keep this up here for a few minutes, only because I found it interesting that, although this is taking cloud migration as an example, any new technology you adopt, I think these are the things you have to start worrying about, and if you go back to my original premise, you can't just bring in a new technology and expect it to work. So there are some steps you need to follow at the core, and then that technology will give you value. So if you talk about taking cloud migration as an example, which this slide does, let's just walk through what it says. So it says, first, integrating a cloud mindset across the business model, organization, culture, roles, processes, and technology, right? Now, the way to read this is, I would say, replace the word cloud with any new technology you implement. So let's say you're going to do IoT solutions for your manufacturing or logistics business. So you change it to read integrating an IoT mindset across the business model of culture, roles, processes. You get what I'm saying? So it's very interesting. This is a beautiful list which actually applies to almost any new technology you might choose. So people upskilling, absolutely. Do cloud or talk IoT, you need upskilling. Talk AI, you need upskilling. Develop a strong cloud strategy operating model. Develop a strong IoT strategy operating model. You get my point, right? So cloud application architecture, IoT application architecture, uh, cloud migration, well, maybe not so much for IoT, you may not need it. Application modernization. I mean, if you are choosing to introduce IoT into your manufacturing or your logistics business, then unless you modernize your entire apps, including the apps that do data acquisition, the apps that do the analytics, the app that present the data, the dashboards, what uses all of the data, your data stores, for example, if you are still working with legacy data stores, then all of this huge amounts of data that IoT is going to feed you, you won't know what to do with it. No? So you have to modernize even your core applications to be able to leverage this new technology, right? Then some of these are specific to cloud, like next gen features or native application development, but cost optimization is common across any technology. Security and risk. If you talk IoT, you are actually introducing a lot more possible attack vectors, right? Because you have so many sensors all over the place, and sensors can be hacked into, wrong data can be fed into your IoT platforms and so on. So security and risk becomes important whatever new technology you implement. Compliance, well, there will be regulations for your business that dictate the terms of use for any new technology. How much can you really use AI? How much can you, if you implement IoT, what kind of data can you really gather, and so on and so forth, right? So I hope you're getting the point I'm trying to make, is that while this is a slide that keeps saying cloud, the same concept will apply to any emerging technology you absorb. Okay. So that's why I like this and I wanted to share it with you. But the last one is now on tools. Okay. And this, I won't spend too much time on this. I'll just explain to you what are the options out there. And obviously each one of you has to choose your own, what works best for you, cost effectiveness, and so on and so forth. But let's just take the DevOps life cycle as a reference, right? The way it goes is it starts with discover, planning, building, testing, monitoring, operating, and then getting feedback, right? So that's the cycle. So let's understand, I'm not going to talk much about the tools, although I have the names up there on the slide. I'm going to talk about the intent of what that tool should do for you in that phase, right? So let's talk the discover phase. Now, in the discover phase, you've got to really simplistically just define the scope of a project or the product requirements. So you're going to capture all of the user issues or the user specifications, user requirements, and so on, which will then be the basis for everything you do from that point, including design, development, deployment, etc. So this stage, traditionally we've been used to using what we call basically just documents. So we call them functional specification documents or many other names. But essentially, it's people trying to write down on in a document what they want, right? Now that's a very linear thought process. It's not very easy to collaborate with such an approach. It's not very easy to brainstorm. So I think the things are the approaches are changing, and there are several tools that are adapting to that change. And I like this word. It's not mine. I borrowed it from somewhere, but asynchronous brainstorming. So asynchronous brainstorming means that you should be able to, anybody in the team should be able to drop an idea for consideration whenever and wherever, right? Otherwise, traditionally, it is like brainstorming implies all of us get into a room and brainstorm, right? Now, that's not really necessary. You have to have an opportunity that whenever I come up with something, I just drop it into the bucket. And there is a way that is taken up for debate. Okay, it doesn't mean I just write it somewhere and we forget about it. So that's the discovery phase, and you got to find the right tools for that. Then obviously there's planning. So planning, it's we do that all the time, but just do it in a more agile way. So I think this is more about agile planning, deciding the sprints. How soon can you show an MVP? How soon can you show the user some incremental progress, and so on. So that's the kind of planning you need to do. And Gone are the days of using Excel sheets and all that for planning. You must use tools that are actually more collaborative, that can be actually updated by multiple people at the same time, and so on. Now, this is getting a little more technical and fun because, for the build process, where you're actually now developing the solutions, the solutions that are coming up, that Kubernetes and Dockers, they are absolutely brilliant, right? So without going into too much detail, essentially they allow you to spin off specific customized environments required for your applications very easily, right? I mean, to spin off another server for development, for UAT or integration or whatever, or even production, is actually extremely simple. I mean, it was already made simple on the cloud, and now this is simple even if you're not on the cloud. So I think this sort of an approach when you're doing the build and the build environments is really going to help. So these tools must be evaluated. And the second point is also very good. This is more for the infrastructure teams or the SREs, or now let's say the DevOps teams. But imagine if you have the ability to provision or spin off new environments, and you have code. Like, I'm calling it code, but it's most likely in actual terms a script. Now that script can be written, it can be maintained under version control, it can be peer reviewed, it can be tested. So now you see how simple life is becoming. You are not doing it manually anymore, so you're not individually dependent. You just have that as a script, and really anybody can be called upon to run that script. Okay, so that's the build tools that you can use. Again, build source control, so that I already talked about it. Let's say you have a script for a particular environment, but as things progress, you want to make some changes to it. You can actually simply version control that. And you may actually have some environments on a previous version, but subsequent environments will be with a new version of the build script, right? So imagine the power you're getting by running build as script. Now, again, we already talked about continuous integration. So use the right tools for that to enable continuous integration across the flow. Okay. Testing, of course. So again, this is coming back to CI/CD and automation. So you obviously need some very powerful testing tools. And the key thing, which again, all of us know very well, automation testing requires a lot of initial effort to get that right. But once it is in place, then it saves a lot of downstream effort, right? And in want to achieve so much agile development, then automation is absolutely important. So spend some time and figure out how much you can automate, what you can automate, but you can't really achieve the end goal without automation. All right. And then deploy. Again, we talk about deployment dashboards. You already have scripts, but it's also useful to know what is the status of all your deployments, and what has succeeded, what has failed. Are there any differences between any of the deployments, so you can take care of that, and so on. And then operate. Operate is simple, nothing but just tracking all the issues that come up. But if you think about it, and then observe is just taking action on what you operate, right? And continuous feedback. So essentially it's saying that all the things that we do, right, from understanding what you need from the application, to developing the application, to deploying the application, testing it, making sure it works, and then running it in production, and identifying the issues that customers face, all of this can be streamlined, automated. Human intervention can be significantly reduced, and human intervention can be required only when some new thing has to be put in, not just to do the more traditional processes. So that's what the concept is. For every step there's a tool. This is what we were talking about, but they all have to tie in together. Will you achieve this? If you don't already have many of this in place, will you achieve this overnight? No, that's impossible. So you are going to do it incrementally. You may choose to automate some bits of it. You may choose to integrate some bits of it. You may reduce the CI/CD frequency. But point of the matter is, the end goal is to try and introduce as much automation and as much agility as possible. All right. So that's really how we need to all move our thought processes, especially as we bring in new technology. I mean, I just like to say this as an interesting side, but I get worried that the speed at which technology is evolving, I mean, sometimes, and the speed at which the traditional waterfall works, 3 months to define requirements. I sometimes worry that by the time you define your requirements, technology is already changed, you know? So I think we can't afford that anymore. So we have to be a lot more agile in our way of working. And everything that I've been talking about so far is essentially suggesting that. All right. So that was about the tools. And now the last bit on key takeaways, right? So just summarizing what I've been said, basically. While technology is evolving at a rapid pace, several mindset changes to leverage the technology well. You need to reorg your teams mainly and upskill them on all the technology and the tools we spoke about, right? Then the second point is actually what I already said. Make sure the people are aligned with all of this, right? If people don't understand what CI/CD is, or even worse, if they understand and don't buy into what CI/CD is, then it's going to be a very, very tough task ahead of you. Okay. The third point is make sure that enterprise processes across functions are aligned. I mean, literally, it sounds odd, but the IT team may build this super agile process and deliver things week after week. But if your front-end team that takes this to market, that takes this to your partners or customers, if they are not agile, if they are not ready to take your deliverables out to market at the speed at which you're delivering them, then it's kind of pointless, right? You'll be delivering a whole lot of goods and they'll just be sitting in the warehouse effectively and they will never reach the customer. So this whole agility and everything needs to extend across processes and not only in IT. Okay. The next step is to ensure that teams are following the right methodologies, focusing on collaboration, feedback, and automation. It's very similar to what I said earlier. Even the end market teams have to introduce automation for all of this to work, right? And the final step is to ensure enterprise uses as many automation tools as possible to improve efficiency. I mean, that's sort of a no-brainer. Automation has always helped. And I hope that helped, and I'm open for Q&A. We have, I think, 5 minutes at least to take some.
There's one question from, Pallavi's thanking you. She's thanking you. She's acknowledging.
Yeah, I just see that. Yeah, Pallavi, thanks.
Yeah, I'm a recruitment consultant, but it made me, it made me very easy to understand how the DevOps and how everything works in collaboration to seamlessly and effortlessly putting this whole process into place. So it was very good knowledge for me.
Thanks, and I'm very happy to see that someone from who's not a pure techie is joining this, because my discussions are meant for everyone. So now when you recruit people for IT companies, I think now you know exactly what you need to expect of these people coming in, right? So
exactly.
I really appreciate your joining. I think that shows a great deal of interest in tech. So.
Yeah, thanks a lot too.
Thank you so much for your wonderful insights. Thanks a lot for this wonderful session.
More than happy, Neeta, and thank you everyone for joining. I hope it helped everyone. Right.
Yes, thank you so much. Bye-bye.